Man, I came here to win rings, not babysit anyone.
That single moment didn't just sting the Lakers, it cracked something inside the franchise. On January 13th, while fans were focused on the Kings beating LA, the real chaos wasn't on the court. It was unfolding in the tunnel. Sources say a heated confrontation erupted between Rich Paul and Austin Reeves' agent, allegedly overgrowing fears that the team might move Reeves just to keep Bronny James in the rotation. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Word is LeBron James and head coach JJ Redick also had a tense exchange behind the scenes, while several veterans had quietly started pointing at Bronny as the root of the team's problems. But the wildest twist, insiders claim all of this drama can be traced back to one message Bronny sent in the team group chat, a message that reportedly changed the locker room dynamic overnight. Before we get to that though, we need to rewind to what actually happened that night. On paper, the Lakers had simply dropped a game to Sacramento 124-112. Ugly loss, sure, but nothing unusual in a long season. The real explosion came the second players walked off the floor. The tension in that tunnel was impossible to miss. Normally, teams keep their internal issues locked behind locker room doors. Not this time. Multiple witnesses, including reporters on site, say Austin Reeves' agent was already waiting in the hallway. And this wasn't a casual post-game meetup. He was there specifically for Rich Paul. Imagine sitting courtside as a fan and watching two of the most influential agents in basketball nearly go at each other before the players even reached the locker room. Here's why emotions were running so high. Reeves is approaching a potential max contract worth close to $200 million. Franchise-altering money. His camp reportedly believes Rich Paul has been maneuvering behind the scenes in ways that could hurt Reeves' long-term position, all in an effort to secure Bronny's role on the team. And yes, Bronny's situation is exactly where this story spirals, because while security was separating the agents, something even bigger was happening deeper inside the arena. Behind closed doors, LeBron and JJ Redick were said to be in a serious discussion about internal expectations, including whispers of a quiet understanding tied to Redick's hiring that some players were never meant to discover. To understand why tensions reached this level, you have to go back 2 months earlier, November 15th, Lakers versus Bucks. The box score says it was a great night. Luka Dončić exploded for 41 points, and the Lakers walked away with a win, but the numbers didn't tell the real story. Bronny James started that game, yet played only 10 minutes. He finished 0 for 2, scoreless, with almost no measurable impact. At the NBA level, that's more than a rough outing. It changes how the entire lineup functions. Dončić is in his prime at 26, chasing MVP level production. Every possession matters, and when a lineup struggles to stay afloat, frustration builds fast. That night, the Lakers' net rating with Bronny on the floor dropped to roughly minus 4.2, a shocking figure for a team that still won. The data suggested LA wasn't winning because of that unit, they were surviving it. Insiders say that's when Redick finally snapped. During the game, he reportedly shouted at Bronny to be more aggressive before pulling him and keeping him on the bench the rest of the night. That decision, according to league chatter, quietly shattered an understanding that had existed since Redick took the job. The rumor around the league has been that LeBron strongly supported Redick's hiring, with the expectation that Bronny would get developmental minutes alongside Dončić. Real game reps meant to fast-track his growth as part of the Lakers' long-term future. It was supposed to be a development plan wrapped inside a championship push. But when Milwaukee began targeting Bronny defensively, Redick's coaching instincts reportedly took over. Winning the game suddenly clashed with protecting the project. After that night, things only escalated. Not long later, Dončić gave an interview that many interpreted as a direct shot at the situation. He made it clear his focus was championships, not long-term experiments, adding that players who need development should earn it wherever that process makes the most sense. That comment hit like a grenade in the locker room. LeBron, sidelined at the time with back issues, was still said to be furious, confronting Redick afterward about abandoning the original plan. From that point on, insiders began describing the team as splitting into quiet factions, one orbiting Dončić's win-now mentality, the other tied to LeBron's influence and clutch sports. And that's when Rich Paul reportedly shifted strategy. Instead of addressing Bronny's role directly, which could look like admitting the experiment wasn't working, the focus turned elsewhere. On January 13th, on the same night as the Kings' loss, Paul went public with comments suggesting the Lakers might need a stronger defensive core around Dončić. In that discussion, Austin Reeves was framed less as a foundational piece and more as a valuable trade asset, with names like Jaren Jackson Jr. floated as potential fits. minutes. To Reeves' camp, that sounded less like analysis and more like positioning, which brings us right back to that tunnel confrontation, and the message Bronny reportedly sent that pushed everything over the edge.
And I came here to win rings, not babysit anyone.
It wasn't subtle, it felt like a power play. The message being sent to Luka Dončić was clear. Fall in line with the Bronny situation, or the one teammate you actually trust could disappear from Los Angeles. The implication wasn't just about basketball decisions, it was about control. From Luka's perspective, it looked like a calculated attempt to cut him off from his support system. The psychology behind it was obvious. The signal coming from Rich Paul and LeBron's camp seemed to be, we shape this roster, we decide the atmosphere, and we determine who's part of your world here. If Luka wouldn't naturally step into the mentor role for Bronny, then maybe pressure would force him into it. That tension is exactly what exploded later that night in the tunnel when Rich Paul and Reeves' agent Reggie Berry nearly came to blows. Berry wasn't about to let Austin Reeves be reduced to leverage in a larger power struggle. What Paul didn't realize, though, was that the situation had already gone far beyond one podcast comment or one trade rumor. By that point, Luka was already carrying resentment that had been building for months. It wasn't just frustration over rotations or minutes anymore. In his mind, something had broken trust entirely, and it all traced back to one leaked message Bronny James had sent in the team group chat, a message Luka reportedly saw as proof that basketball decisions weren't purely about winning. To him, it confirmed his worst suspicion, that the organization was being influenced by family priorities rather than competitive ones. And that leak didn't just affect Luka. It reportedly created tension in another key relationship too, between LeBron and Anthony Davis. Because if you think the chaos in that January tunnel started with a single loss, you're missing the real beginning of the story. To find when the Lakers truly started fracturing internally, you have to rewind to February 1st, 2025. That was the day the entire NBA world flipped. The Luka for Anthony Davis trade had floated around as a wild rumor for weeks, the kind nobody seriously believed would happen. Then suddenly, it was real. But the most shocking part wasn't the deal itself, it was how the players learned about it. According to A Hollywood Ending by Yaron Weitzman, the front office had planned to handle the news carefully. The idea was to inform players privately first, keeping the locker room calm and controlled. That's not what happened. Instead, Bronny reportedly saw Shams Charania's tweet announcing the trade and immediately dropped the link into the team group chat. Picture that moment from Anthony Davis's point of view. You helped bring this franchise a championship. You sacrificed your body anchoring their defense for years. And the first confirmation that you're being sent to Dallas doesn't come from the organization. It comes from a message in the team chat posted by a rookie, who also happens to be your best friend's son. Davis's reaction, according to people familiar with the moment, was ice cold.
If I was the Lakers, I would probably be targeting the Memphis Grizzlies as a trade partner for Jaren Jackson.
Yeah. That'd be a great fit.
I would.
For whom?
One scenario, right? Or you could say, let me withhold that, but this comes with
Austin Reeves.
This comes with a very unemotional attachment.
LeBron's reaction in the group chat wasn't just confusion. That what just happened text wasn't about shock. It was about pressure. Because in that moment, he didn't just lose Anthony Davis, his closest ally, his defensive backbone, the guy who carried the dirty work. What he got back was Luka Dončić, a generational superstar he now had to share the stage with. For 2 decades, LeBron has been the center of the NBA universe. Everything orbited around him, every team, every storyline, every spotlight, and suddenly the Lakers brought in a 25-year-old phenomenon who wasn't just another star, he was the future of the league, already performing at an MVP level. That's when the tension really began. LeBron likely envisioned the franchise eventually transitioning from him to Bronny, a smooth passing of the torch, a legacy storyline the league could market for years. But Luka's arrival shattered that script overnight. You can't sell the league on a prince when a reigning king in his prime is already holding the crown. Right now, Luka is leading the NBA in scoring, dropping over 33 points a night and putting up video game numbers on a routine basis. And yet the Lakers are hovering around mediocrity. Why? Because the roster construction isn't purely about basketball. Whenever Luka and Bronny share the court, the team's performance dips sharply, reflected in a negative net rating that tells the whole story. The league's most dominant offensive engine is being forced to compensate for lineups that simply don't function. From Luka's perspective, that's exhausting. He's logging massive minutes, carrying the offense, and pushing at full throttle every night, all while feeling like part of the rotation exists for reasons beyond winning. To understand why this bothers him so much, you have to look at where Luka came from. He didn't arrive in the NBA through hype or connections. He turned pro in Spain as a teenager, battling grown men in one of the toughest leagues in the world before most kids his age even finished school. His entire career has been built on merit, production, and proving himself the hard way. So in his world, there's a simple rule. If you can help the team win, you play. If you can't, you don't. And he's not the only one noticing. Even NBA legends have started hinting at the same issue. Charles Barkley went on Inside the NBA and didn't hold back, openly questioning what was happening in Los Angeles.
I believe this man. They just traded me to the worst franchise in NBA history.
That comment clearly struck a nerve with LeBron, because throughout his entire career, he's never been the third option, not in Miami, and definitely not during his Cleveland years. But now, with Luka Dončić firmly established as the team's centerpiece, reports suggest LeBron may be leaning on the one area where his influence still carries weight, the rotation. The message it sends is simple. Maybe he's not the top scorer anymore, but he can still shape how the pieces move. And if you think this tension is only about minutes or hierarchy, it goes deeper than that. This rivalry has roots. There's footage from November 2025 that people still bring up. The moment LeBron appeared to brush past Luka after a game without the usual post-game handshake. Small detail on the surface, but moments like that don't happen in a vacuum. Because LeBron's ambitions have never stopped at being just a basketball legend. He's always aimed to shape the business, the branding, and the culture around the sport. That's been part of his identity for years. But one particular setback from earlier in the decade reportedly lingered longer than most people realized. Back in 2020, LeBron was pushing a vision with Nike, something bigger than a signature shoe. He wanted a full sub-brand built around him, a long-term empire modeled after what Michael Jordan created decades earlier. To make that work, he knew he needed a younger superstar to eventually carry that banner forward, and the player he had in mind was Luka Dončić. LeBron openly talked about it in interviews and podcasts at the time. He admired Luka's style, his playmaking, and the way fans connected with him. In LeBron's eyes, Luka wasn't just another star. He was the future face of the game. The plan seemed simple. Align with Luka early, bring him into that ecosystem, and build something that would outlast his playing career. In a sense, LeBron believed he could help shape the next era. But what he didn't expect was for Luka to turn that idea down.
They're going to move on, and I think that's the right thing to do. At some point, you got to turn the team over to Luka and Austin. And that's the only way you can start, because you can't be paying him $50 million a year to be the third best player on a team.
Nike didn't move quickly enough to make LeBron's vision happen. And truthfully, Luka Dončić may not have been interested anyway. Around the league, it's no secret that Luka's style, mindset, and personality line up more naturally with Michael Jordan's legacy than with LeBron's. If there's one current player people believe could someday build a resume that echoes MJ's level of impact, Luka is always near the top of that conversation. So instead of becoming the centerpiece of LeBron's proposed brand empire, Luka made a different choice. He signed a massive endorsement deal with Jordan Brand. You can imagine how that landed with LeBron. For 2 decades, he's been chasing Jordan's shadow. The championships, the mythology, the global dominance. And the young superstar he hoped would help define his post-playing legacy didn't just pass on the opportunity, he aligned himself directly with the very figure LeBron has spent his career being compared to. LeBron even admitted publicly that Luka choosing Jordan over him stuck with him. He joked about it in interviews, saying it would haunt him a bit and that he had hoped Luka would be the first major athlete to represent his vision. Fast forward to 2026, and that lingering feeling seems to have hardened into something more tense. Luka is now clearly the centerpiece of the Lakers, leading the league in scoring at over 33 points per game and commanding the offense every night, all while wearing the Jumpman logo. Every time he drills one of those signature step-back threes in Los Angeles, the symbolism is impossible to miss. The franchise's present and future star representing the brand tied to the player LeBron is forever measured against. And if you want a glimpse of how personal that dynamic might be, people often point to a moment from late November 2025. After a whistle-stopped play, Luka casually walked toward LeBron and held out his hand for a routine low five, the kind of small, automatic gesture teammates exchange dozens of times a game. LeBron looked right at him, saw the hand, and didn't respond. It was brief, easy to overlook if you weren't paying attention. But moments like that don't go unnoticed inside a locker room.
I wanted Luka to be the first signee of Team LeBron when he was going through his situation. And it didn't happen. He's still under the same umbrella of Nike.
That wasn't just an ignored handshake. That was years of tension, pride, and unresolved frustration spilling into one tiny moment. LeBron wasn't looking at a young star he once hoped to mentor anymore. He was looking at the player who turned down his vision, chose another brand, and then became the face of his own team. At that point, it wasn't only about basketball, it was business, legacy, and pride all wrapped into one rivalry. The kind fueled by money, status, and history neither side seems ready to forget. And that cold interaction wasn't an isolated moment either. Over time, LeBron's comments and tone have hinted at subtle jabs toward Luka. Right now, LeBron may be the most accomplished third option the sport has ever seen, and the adjustment clearly hasn't been easy. By the end of last season, the energy around the Lakers had noticeably shifted. For the first time in more than 2 decades, LeBron's usage rate dropped to around 28%, the lowest of his career. In basketball terms, that's not just a stat, it signals a reduced role. And if there's one thing LeBron has never really been, it's a supporting character. Instead of quietly settling into a secondary spot behind a 26-year-old superstar in his prime, his post-game interviews began sounding more defensive. He often spoke about how much he was adapting, how he was adjusting his style, and how much he was sacrificing for the team's success. The message, intentional or not, sometimes came across like this: Luka's numbers might be huge, but they're happening within a system LeBron is helping make possible. It framed the partnership less like a shared mission and more like a compromise. One moment in particular stood out. After tensions involving coach JJ Redick made headlines, LeBron went on ESPN and said, "If we're relying on a 41-year-old to be our best defender, that's a problem." On the surface, it sounded like a general comment about team defense, but many people interpreted it as a pointed remark aimed at Luka's defensive limitations, essentially questioning the effort of the league's most productive offensive player on national TV. What made the situation even more awkward was the statistical backdrop.
I feel like it's going to haunt me a little bit.
It's going to haunt you.
But I wanted him to be my guy. I wanted him to be my first.
During that same stretch, Bronny's defensive numbers were among the lowest in the rotation, with opponents frequently targeting him in the minutes he did play. Meanwhile, Luka was logging heavy workloads, carrying the offense for nearly 40 minutes a night. From the outside, it looked like Luka was shouldering the burden while still catching criticism from the father of the rookie he was sharing the floor with. And that protective instinct from LeBron, the father-first mentality, isn't new. He's always defended his circle. But one moment from March 6, 2025 at Madison Square Garden showed just how personal it can get. Earlier that week on First Take, Stephen A. Smith had offered blunt criticism of Bronny's early struggles, saying the young guard looked like he needed more development time. When the Lakers faced the Knicks, LeBron didn't ignore it. During the game, he reportedly walked over towards Stephen A. Smith's courtside seat and confronted him directly, making it clear he didn't appreciate the commentary. It wasn't loud enough to stop the game, but it was obvious enough that cameras and fans picked up on it. And in that moment, it felt like the tension surrounding the Lakers wasn't just about wins and losses anymore. It had become personal, public, and impossible to hide. Clip LeBron reportedly told him to stop taking shots at my son, and the exchange quickly turned heated enough that security started paying attention. The way he approached it made it feel like things could have escalated if it went on any longer. Think about that scene for a second. One of the most powerful athletes on the planet getting visibly fired up over a media comment about his son's jumper. It was pure superstar intensity, and the aftermath didn't stop there. From that point on, it felt like anyone who valued their connections around the league suddenly had to tread carefully. Players, media personalities, even former teammates seemed to pick sides. Draymond Green, for example, openly pushed back at Stephen A. Smith on his podcast and made it clear he wasn't interested in engaging with him afterward. To many observers, it looked like a warning shot. Criticize Bronny too loudly, and you risk becoming persona non grata in certain circles. Mention his production or question his role, and suddenly you're painted as the villain. On all of those tensions, the tunnel confrontation, the branding rivalry, the friction with JJ Redick, finally converged on February 5th, the trade deadline. That was the moment the Lakers' internal conflict became impossible to ignore. While contenders across the league were making aggressive moves for the playoff push, Los Angeles felt stuck. The front office faced a brutal dilemma: make a bold basketball decision to rescue the season or keep prioritizing stability around LeBron and his inner circle. In the end, they chose a move that felt underwhelming overwhelming to many, and possibly frustrating for Luka. They sent out Gabe Vincent and brought in Luke Kennard. On paper, it added shooting, but context matters. Luka was already carrying massive minutes and one of the highest usage rates in the league, doing most of the offensive creation himself. The team didn't need more spacing nearly as much as it needed defensive toughness and leadership. Marcus Smart was already battling on that end, but he couldn't cover everything alone. The roster still lacked that intimidating, tone-setting presence many thought Luka needed beside him. Rumors had been circulating that a larger deal involving Draymond Green was at least discussed, a move that could have reshaped the team's identity overnight, but nothing materialized. So instead of a defensive enforcer, Luka got another perimeter shooter expected to spot up while he handled the workload. If the deadline felt like a quiet admission that the season wasn't going as planned, the All-Star voting made it impossible to hide. For the first time in over 2 decades, LeBron James wasn't voted in as an All-Star starter. That's historic. The player who defined the league for an entire generation was now introduced as a reserve, and at the very top of the voting charts, Luka Dončić. He didn't just make the team, he led the entire world in fan votes, pulling in nearly 4 million. Symbolically, it marked a shift that had been building for years. The 2026 All-Star Game is set for the Intuit Dome in Inglewood, right in the Lakers' backyard, and the faces on the billboards aren't centered on the 41-year-old legend anymore. They're built around the 26-year-old Slovenian star in Jordan sneakers. For someone who spent his career at the center of the basketball universe, watching that transition happen in real time can't be easy, because now the spotlight belongs to the same player who declined his business vision, resisted mentoring his son, and has suddenly become the league's most popular figure right in his own city.